Namaskar, everybody. Mero Nepali naramrocha, so I'll stick to English. I have started a second venture called Village Infrastructure Angels. 4 years after that, I developed wind farms in Australia, so I went back and got a real job, and didn't last very long there. So jumped ship and created a village power company called Barefoot Power that created solar LED lighting systems, basically your solar tuki. But mass-produced in China. I spent 4 years there, wrestling with factories to make high-quality products that would actually last more than 3 months. And we managed to sell over 400,000 lighting kits of 1, 2, 5 and 10-watt solar LED lighting systems between 2006 and 11, before I was gently removed by the investors to put a suit in front of me, and that's another story. There's a few achievements there which I won't go into too much, other than maybe the raising of $10 million of debt, grants and equity from 70 separate deals. That's like closing a deal every month for 6 years. Between that and the Chinese factories is why I now have no hair. I'm very happy to talk to you about the struggles of raising capital as an entrepreneur and those sorts of things and some of the innovations around that, but I won't go into too much detail here. The VIA achievements just recently, we haven't been alive for too long, but we've been working well with the Asian Development Bank and World Bank as repeat clients to help grow the space and bring a few ideas to market. We've built solar mini-grids and charging stations in a variety of countries, from Africa to the Americas to the Pacific. We've created innovative mapping software that actually maps the individual locations of households. When I was in Jumla, had to run around with a measuring tape and actually measure out the village. Now with Google Maps, I can actually see that village, and I can get the latitude and longitude and the distances between them without going to the village. So that sort of planning software is really helpful for doing the last mile planning of these projects. And we've brought that onto an online development atlas, a map of energy-focused data with 2 million data points, 500 layers of information, some of which is for Nepal, which is free and for everybody's benefit. We've raised a little bit of capital, and I think I'm going to have to beat the street to raise a bit more in the future, so looking forward to that. What's my main message? My main message as a room full of mostly entrepreneurs is survive. Survive the drive. This is a sign you'll see around rural Australia, and is focused on the long distances that we drive around Australia. And it's a long drive when you're an entrepreneur as well. Barefoot was a long and painful journey, not particularly glamorous, and I don't expect the next one to be so either. Does anybody here have a Ferrari? Massive house? Yeah, that's what I thought. So we're not really in this game to get stinkingly rich, are we? So what we're trying to do is deliver these services and hopefully have a life in the process. One of the toys that we've been working around with is a Sustainable Energy for All Developers Atlas. So I've been the working group chair for the UN Foundation during 2012, and instead of creating a report about what we'd like to have and look for funding, we just started building it. So this is an example from the Philippines where we've mapped out the percentage of access to electricity at a subnational level. And then cross-multiply that with the population to get the absolute number of people without access in different areas. The density of people, you don't want to be chasing people all over the hillside that are scattered all over the place, so the density of the market is important in some places. And then other things, such as road access locations, whatever might be useful for you guys to do your job. We've got several layers up for Nepal as well, and we're working with the World Bank to add more layers. I've just been digging around the Bureau of Statistics yesterday, getting ward-level population data, working with AEPC on electricity access, as we've seen a map earlier. We'll expand that hopefully to most of the country. And so anything that we can do to help you guys find your projects and develop your projects, just let us know. That's what we're there to do. Some login details there to have a play with. You can see them online later. This is some of the mapping work that we've been doing. This is an example of cell towers around Nepal. So we're going to be working with NCell and NTC to try and map out where the thousands of telco towers are around the country. You can see clusters around Kathmandu and Pokhara there, obviously, and a good density in the Terai, a thinner density out in the hills. The maps on the bottom left is the percentage access to electricity, and the bottom right is the absolute number of people without electricity. So you can see there are actually two different pictures of the market. The percentage access might be low in Humla, but because of the low population, the number of people without electricity is also low. Over 1,000 hydro projects have been roughly mapped. Sometimes we don't know exactly which ward of a VDC they're in or which cola is which cola, but we're pretty close. So we're starting to build one of the true power maps of Nepal. If I could get the poles and wires from the consulting engineers for each of these projects, we could even map the poles and wires and have the transmission network of Nepal. This is a small step towards the true power map of Nepal and knowing which villages do and do not have electricity. So it's a work under work at the moment. So what we're trying to find is where are the micro hydros, at least in the hills, close to where the towers are. So this is what we tried to do here, and you can see the green dots telco towers which are more than 5 kilometres away from a micro hydro, so not really candidates for connection. But the red dots are the telco towers that are within 5 kilometres of a micro hydro. And so they could potentially be sites where interconnection can happen. When we did this comparison and then went out into the field, we found they'd already connected. The potential had already been verified. Our great friend from Barpak, and it's a delight to finally see and meet the man that I've read about for many years. He's got 3 towers on his microhydro, and I believe there's about 10 or 20 microhydros that are already confirmed to have telco towers as customers. So these potentials are happening. In some districts of Nepal, it absolutely won't work. Here is a model of telco towers around Kavran Palanchok. That's all the brown triangles there on the top half of the screen. And the micro hydros with a 5 kilometre buffer are on the southern half. They're in completely opposite areas. So having this connection of micro hydros to telco towers won't work in all geographies. And we need to look at other business models to be able to electrify other areas using other business candidates, maybe FM tower locations or whatever it may be. And I think in Nepal there's quite a bit of investment interest even just to connect communities. There's a fairly rich tradition there, so maybe we do not need so many anchor loads. But out in the east, for example, in Panchtar district and surrounding areas, we're seeing quite a few overlaps of where the towers are located with where the microhydros are located. This is my job, to try and help identify these sorts of project areas for you so you guys can get out there and do your job faster. What we need to make sure is that these telco towers actually need the microhydro or the solar project, that they're already using lots of diesel. So we're also working on consumption data. Not every one of those towers would be a project. Only the ones that are using high amounts of diesel would be the best projects to go and develop. Some of the numbers behind what might make a good project. Here's an example of a cost estimate of what you might need for a few kilometres of poles and wires, between $10,000 and $20,000 for the poles and wires to connect the microhydro to a telco tower. And then the telco tower is going to need about 3 to 5 kilowatts of power. But you're probably going to have a micro-hydro that's anywhere from 10 to 50 kilowatts in size that's connecting it. So it'll just be a modest amount of load on a fairly large system. I won't go into too many of the details there, but basically with those sorts of characteristics and numbers, which you can inspect later, we're seeing simple payback periods of somewhere between 2.5 to 5 years for a tower that's already using 12 hours of diesel per day. So we hope that we are identifying true economic possibilities, but one isolated project in the middle of nowhere doesn't make a business. So we also need to look at how can we get enough business in certain areas to make sure that your expensive trip out there is worthwhile. So we're looking at connecting households and other businesses around that particular project site to make it big enough to be interesting. What are some of the problems? There's going to be plenty of problems. Murphy's Law applies. Anything that can go wrong absolutely will go wrong in rural energy, at least in my experience, and in Chinese factories for that matter. So one of the biggest problems that I've seen out there is that there is no peak power available in the dry season. The water has dried up a bit, the power consumption has gone down. The interest in electricity has risen over previous years, and it is fully used up. What are we going to do? Make more power? Often we can't. There's no more water, and you can't get more elevation drop because above and below that microhydro, there's more microhydros. So you can't actually make more power even if you wanted to. So one of the alternatives there is to replace the lighting that's in most of the microhydros now with what's become standard for solar, and that's LED lighting. And LED lighting can reduce maybe 30 watts of lighting load per household. For the 100 kilowatt project in Barpak, I'd estimate you could save 20 to 30 kilowatts of peak power just by relamping all the lamps that are there at the moment. This also increases the value of the electricity that's being sold. If you charge 1 rupee per watt per month, 40 rupees, 30 rupees per watt, per lamp per month, but you actually only use 3 watts to produce what was coming out of a 25 watt bulb, then you're actually getting 10 rupees, more like 100 rupees per kilowatt hour instead of 10 rupees per kilowatt hour. You're generating the same service using 1/10 of the energy, and you're increasing the value of the energy being sold. You're also able to use that spare power to connect a lot more households. Instead of a 10 kilowatt system connecting 100 households, it could connect 500 households. That's a lot more revenue for an existing project. And the cost per kilowatt of relamping with LEDs is only about $500 per kilowatt. Making extra power is about $4,000 per kilowatt. So it's a very cost-effective way of getting high-value energy and more revenue for it. We need to free up 24/7 energy and power for that telco tower, so we need to make sure there's enough capacity there at the peak evenings so that they get the 99% reliability that they're aiming for, and they'll punish you if they're not getting it. That's just one problem and one possible solution. There's other problems, lots of them. But that's what I'm here to try and help with. So if there's any issues that you come up with that I may be able to help with, then just reach out through the email. For me, I think there's also issues about power quality from these microhydros. You might actually have a good quality LED lamp after doing some selection, but the power quality and the voltage spikes out of microhydros might blow them up. So there's still a bit of work that needs to be done before we can get all the pieces together where we're going to have successful and reliable projects. And we're going to need some help along the way from guys like AEPC and World Bank and the government. So hopefully all those magical ingredients can come together and we can start building some projects. In the Terai, there's over 1,000 towers, so moving away from microhydro here, there's higher population density, easier terrain, so there's more density of market to be adventurous in. 50 to 60% access to electricity, so plenty of households nearby. We've heard some fantastic stories of similar projects in Uttar Pradesh and India where cost-effective services are being delivered successfully. It would be great to bring those across the border and to try them out in the lands around here. These may require 10 to 30 kilowatt solar projects to connect 2 or 3 towers in one clustered area rather than single isolated towers by themselves. Might cost $50,000 to $100,000 per project instead of maybe $30,000 for the hydro projects. So it's going to be more expensive to do the solar projects, and that'll mean longer payback periods. That's a known. But with a bit of assistance from the program, hopefully we can generate attractive financial returns. OMC Power is an example of an entrepreneur in India that's using a battery charging model. Instead of laying down the wires and connecting households, they're using battery packs which can be as small as this, or even as small as this. This is how simple and easy transmitting electricity to households can be. And we don't necessarily have to put down kilometres and kilometres of wire if it's not absolutely necessary. When we're transmitting a small amount of electricity for LED lights, we're also looking at thinner cables. So I'm thinking that maybe the traditional ideas of poles and wires that we had before may become thin wires like electric fences that are actually connecting these villages at high voltage to reach 5 kilometres from a certain source. So a few little innovations like that are things that we'd like to throw out there and see what can come back. Lastly, on top of the mapping that we've been doing, we've also been diving right down to the last level and doing that household mapping I was talking about. And that helps us to plan where are the actual demands in the rural area and what would be a good way to reach out to those different areas. This is an example from Sumba Island in Indonesia, and the map on the right shows the percentage of solar penetration that existed in different wards of that particular island, and also where the grid access was in grey. So this gave us a much more accurate picture of what the real situation was, and therefore what we had to do. In a Nepali context, I've done the same thing out in Panchtar. Here's an example project of a 30 kilowatt microhydro out at Ekdeen VDC, about 4 kilometres away from an N-cell tower that's got 12 to 13 hours of diesel. All those red dots are the households nearby. I don't have to run around with my tape measure anymore, thank goodness, to collect that sort of information. So I can now make a pretty good 10 to 20 kilowatt plan of electrifying those households. Once we get ward information of which wards have electricity, or I contact the consulting engineer who designed that and get his pole and wire information, I'll know which households there already have electricity and which don't. So that's an example of how we're trying to use these mapping tools to design projects quickly and efficiently. So thanks very much for your time, and any questions, don't be afraid to reach out and ask. I've got 1 million cards in my bag, so I'd like to get in contact with you guys in the months to come. I'll be back here around March 7 to 28 as well, doing some field work, so there's more opportunities to catch up with me then. Thank you.
Thank you.